Recording in progress.
There we go. That might make it easier. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, February 19th meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission. We'll call the meeting to order and begin with a roll call.
Commissioner Slade.
Present.
Commissioner Cole.
Here.
Commissioner Hickman.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson. One. Commissioner Roland Johnson.
Two.
Here.
How long that joke gets.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so looks like there are no minutes for item 2 on the agenda. So we're going to be in the March 19th meeting. So now we want to approve of tonight's agenda.
While we're on the topic of minutes, for Roland and Richard, do you mind if I call you Commissioner Roland and Commissioner Richard in the minutes, or do you want to be Johnson 1 and Johnson 2, or do you have a preference?
Whichever is easiest for you as far as I'm concerned.
Me too.
Okay.
1 and 2 seems good.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a decoder ring, how do you know who's going?
I know, which one's good, yeah.
I'm an Ovaltine, so.
But the emails are Johnson 2, Roland's emails are Johnson 2.
So moving on, approval of tonight's agenda. Any changes anybody would like to make to tonight's agenda? Any comments from the public changing tonight's agenda? Bring back to the commission then.
Move to approve.
Second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes unanimously. Now we move on to items from the floor. For any members of the public wishing to speak on items that are not on the agenda, now is your opportunity. There is currently nobody in virtual land. Anybody in the room is a burning desire. Feel free to tackle the microphone. Nobody seems to be doing that quite yet, so we will move on. Item from the floor. Moving on to our real agenda items. Number 1, election of Planning Commission Chair, Vice Chair, committee assignments. Trevor.
Right. So, generally after election cycles and appointments of new commissioners, we re-elect chair and vice chair and review committee assignments. So that's all that this is about. You can nominate yourself or you can nominate someone else. Currently, Commissioner Hickman is the chair and Richard is the vice chair. And that's been since 2003 we did the elections.
23.
Yeah, no, it hasn't been that long. 2023.
Sorry, making it seem 2 decades longer than they are. Feedback noted.
Richard might have been on the commission back then, but so that's that. And you can, the language used to say the chair could only be someone who hadn't served before, but that got to be problematic. We're having a lot of turnover. So now you're free to elect whoever you think is the most qualified. And then in terms of committees, there's only one active committee that has a planning commissioner appointed to it, and that is the Trails Committee. And Commissioner Hopkins was the Trails Committee representative, and so we'll need to elect a new representative to the Trinidad Trail Committee, and I provided the resolution forming that committee so that you have some information about its purpose and how often it. That's what trails are always a fun topic.
Right. Well, then we'll begin with Commission Chair and Vice Chair.
Well, I will nominate Commissioner Hackett to remain as chair and willing to step down from vice chair. Allow someone else to pick up the reins, so to speak. So that would be my nomination.
Anybody different? Anybody rare the vice chair or the chair?
I guess I would just ask Richard if your preference is to step down or if you're just willing to step down.
I one capacity or another have been chair or vice chair for a long time. It's all in the notes that this is an opportunity. someone else to pick up and I don't say necessarily gain experience, but it is something that I just, it's fine. I'm fine with it. No problem.
I'm willing to be vice chair and I support getting taken in this place.
Cycle, I'm good with that.
I'm sure the formal.
Vice chair.
Any changes to that,
Second to motion
to
or
that motion, I guess, Richard has a motion for me to remain?
Also move.
Okay,
I'll second it.
all right, all those in favor? Aye.
I
All right, opposed? All right, unanimous.
congratulations.
Thanks, congratulations.
Thanks.
Congratulations, Richard. Well done.
I don't look at it.
No. But appreciate your support though. That's a few interesting things that have come up. Committee assignments. The only one we have left now is the Trails Committee, as Trevor mentioned, the Flood Advisor was the other one that's been sunsetted also by the,
I'll just say I'm interested.
okay. Anybody
I'll
else
just say I'm a
interested?
junior member, so if anybody else wants to, would understand.
Okay. Thank you, Roland. Any other interest from commissioners on being on the Trails Committee?
Sorry, Roland, did you express your interest in that?
You did,
I wouldn't go so far as to nominate him, but I do admire the extent to which Commissioner Cole's been engaged with the various trail discussions and projects and whatnot. I'm putting all our eggs in one basket, and I'm also not nominating officially, but I can see merit there.
Sure. I mean, I obviously been thinking about it. Well, maybe not obviously, but since we got back in, I thought about it. I'm also willing to put my hat in the ring. If it's a contest. For the trails.
You know, I say I'm awful new at this, so I would have to learn it. Scratch. If I've been involved in trails for 20 years.
Point of order, is it necessary to assign a alternate?
We haven't usually. So, it's nice.
I would definitely, yield to the senior member here.
What sense?
It's like a coup d'etat.
I know. I think so. So then, Roland, are you withdrawing yourself then?
I will.
Okay. Then I'll nominate Tristan for the Trails Committee.
I accept.
Accept.
That's what I need to do.
I don't know. All right. All those in favor of Tristan?
I
All right, passes unanimously. All right. That's pretty fast. Now moving on to item number 2, the trails update. Trevor.
So this is just my monthly update on the Van Wyck Trail and the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail. As reported last month, the Van Wyck Trail closure was allowed to expire in December. It was brought to staff's attention that there was a trail close ahead sign that was left up after the closure expired, and then a new sign that said no coastal access was added as part of the Edward Street improvements. Our original intent was to have a sign that pointed down Edwards as coastal access as opposed to discouraging people from going down Van Wyck. We did consult with Coastal Commission staff, and because that kind of sign affects public access, it's probably something that required a coastal development permit and proximity to the bluff as well. So that sign was subsequently removed. That's it. The Van Wyck Trail, this is sort of an interim short-term solution. We don't know how long the trail will remain in its current state, as it's fairly rough shape already. So the city is still going to have to think about whether it's going to pursue further repairs to the trail or close it long term. So that will continue to be an issue. And then Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail, the vegetation removal that you guys approved last year did occur during the weather window in January. And staff the city engineer did visit the site with a member of the Ancestral Society to take a look at the layout. It's about what was expected. You know, that the transition from the trail, the bluff to the beach is going to be problematic. You know, the city engineer still thinks something like a custom-made aluminum staircase that can just kind of be pressed in there for the summer might be the most viable solution. The one thing that was noted was that the steps, the original steps are in pretty rough shape and will also need some repairs if the trail is reopened. Coastal Commission staff and the Ancestral Society have also discussed the option of opening part of the trail if we can't get a repair ready for next summer. So that will continue to be discussed. So we are working on solutions for short term. The appeal, as you know, the temporary closure of the trail was appealed to the Coastal Commission. Their first step in that process is to decide if the appeal has merit, basically, if it raises substantial issues. So they heard that at their February meeting, and the commission did concur with staff's recommendation that the appeal raised no substantial issue. And I was encouraged by some of the comments from commissioners that they, have been to the trail, and not just Mike Wilson, but some from out of the area as well. We're familiar with the trail and some of the issues, so they do understand the complexities of that situation. And then for the longer term, the management team met again in February, and we're still working on putting together a proposal for through the Ocean Protection Council for implementation funding to construct the sort of boardwalk improvements that were proposed in GHD study for sort of the permanent improvements to the trail. And we're looking at including some other project elements, looking at bluff stability and some other things that will provide multiple benefits for that area as part of the grant funding. And we're pretty encouraged about getting funding since these projects were identified in the coastal resiliency plan that we just finished up. So we'll be continuing to work on that and expect to submit a letter of interest in March. That's your report.
I have a question. Is this serious that they considering that trail be open by May?
That is the goal, and that's when the current closure will expire. So we do have to revisit the issue one way or the other by Memorial Weekend. If it was as simple as something as a aluminum ladder staircase, maybe that could be done. Or again, a partial opening of the trail could possibly be done, but it's absolutely going to be a challenge. I don't know.
So who's responsible for safety then?
For safety?
Yeah, getting down to the beach from that.
I mean, the city ultimately.
Yeah.
I won't say anything more about that, but
I don't, but I will. Joe Tagliabue, city manager here at Trinidad. I think that's a good question, and ultimately the city is at risk for all the trails that we
manage and maintain in the city limits. So that one is no exception. It provides some pretty high risk access, even with the mitigated suggestion that I think the TMT group talked about at our last meeting. That's kind of a halfway measure to provide some access. Even that would probably have some risk, but not as much as full access to that trail as currently exists.
That would doesn't embedded where it looks continuous. Any transition from semi-solid ground at the top down through that area that's failing to look at.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough piece of engineering, as you well know, as a geotechnical person. Yeah, some challenging design elements, some challenging engineering. Soil conditions are unstable. It's gonna be a nice piece of work if we're able to complete it and provide access to.
I was just thinking the temporary nature of it.
You know, the temporary one's going to be rough. Yeah, I think that's optimistic to say that we can put aluminum ladder in, provide access, because our risk management agency might weigh in on that a little bit. And when I was younger, I probably would have went on it, no problem. But with a new hip and a new knee, I'm not going anywhere near that thing. Thank you.
Questions for Trevor from the rest of the commissioners?
Just in fact, sorry, Joe, that might have been something to address with you. So it looks like that there is a possibility that only half of the trail will be opened.
In the short, I mean, that's one alternative that we will be exploring.
We're looking at a variety of options.
So with that in mind, the upper part of the trail, which is in one of the photographs that was taken in the city there, is there any thought about trying to repair the stairs on that part?
Yes, that would definitely be something that we would look at as part of reopening any part of the trail.
Any part of the trail, okay.
Yeah, that would have to be included as part of the reopening.
Paul, is that something that's going to be pursued while the rest of the stuff plays out? So that way that's not a roadblock?
Our hopes are that we can do multiple things simultaneously, yes.
Fair enough.
That's novel.
Yeah. Any questions from the commissioners? Comments?
Does the has the plan required crossing over to the rock and then descending from the rock? Has that essentially been eliminated as a possibility?
From my discussion with Steve Allen, yeah, probably. I mean, I think that would require, some geotechnical and engineering to do that. And so it would have to be something similar.
Have a couple of comments, I guess. First, thanks for taking the no coastal access sign down. I've noticed that there was that need to be there for on the Van Wyck Trail. And then yeah, I tuned into the Axel Lincoln Trail to make it getting the Cooper to whatever it is. But I think one of the commissioners made an interesting point that was just, which is sort of what we're talking about, or maybe it was a question, but they asked what happens if the year fires and the trail's not reopened. And I think the city sort of, well, based on the staff report that was given by the Coastal Commission staff, it sort of neglected to mention the fact that there had already been a series of closures of extensions of site closures previous to the closure that they were actually hearing. I think the coastal commission itself didn't really hear the fact that this trail has been closed multiple times through various coastal development permits that have been extended and such. I hope that Memorial Day the trail's open, of course, but it sounded to me like there was some concern from the coastal commission that that might not happen, which hopefully they care enough to. But that was just a comment. And then my last comment is regarding the design. Trying to get some kind of a temporary solution down to get down to the beach. Obviously, you guys have been working with city engineer, and I've made this request before, but I would request that you also consult RCAA. Somebody who's not an engineer might have a more listing, less technical approach that could actually.
I'll open it up for public comment now. Anybody in the room? Anything on the Axel Lindgren Trail or Van Wyck Trail? Now is your opportunity. Still nobody in virtual land. Please remaining stationary in the room. Bring it back to the commission. The only, I guess, comment I'll make, and just Joe, since you're in the room, and Trevor, since you're staff at a lot of these meetings, is I think my opinion is that a lot of where we find ourselves with these deteriorated trails is because of a conscious decision on the part of the city to not maintain something because of the fear that it might encourage access. And I just want to comment that I don't agree with that. I think that had we perhaps been maintaining the upper stairwell of the Van Wyck, or excuse me, the Axel Lindgren Trail, they might not have deteriorated as you know, I can't tell exactly the deterioration is in the picture, but my point is just, I would strongly encourage the city to maintain the trail system, right? That's one of the things that has gotten the city in a bit of a pickle in the past when it's of the opinion of some of the commissioners that there hasn't been routine maintenance being done. So I would encourage the city to do routine maintenance of the trails. And I guess I'll just leave it as a comment because there's not really any need for, you know, a reply. And I see you nodding, Joe, so I know you are hearing, and Trevor as well. So with that, are we ready to move on to item number 3? Sure. Continuing as the star of the show.
All right. So this is a pretty straightforward project to enclose an existing garage. I think this is a good example of a project that it would be nice to be able to approve administratively. And we do have some draft regulations to do some administrative permits that will go along with our ADU ordinance. So I think this is the kind of thing that we had in mind. It doesn't fall under an exemption because it's got, you know, there is an exemption for accessory structures up to 500 square feet, but we limit that to up to 500 square feet. And so there's already other accessory structures. The garage was rebuilt last year. So, and it does alter the external profile of the structure. So requires design review. It's at the corner of Trinity and West, just down the street. You've probably driven by there. One issue I should mention is that 2 commissioners live within 500 feet of the project. And so there is a presumed conflict of interest when that occurs. So it's about 400 feet and 375 feet. Used to be 300 feet in small communities, but they did away with that exemption, unfortunately, because we use that quite a bit. But in this situation, you have the option to rebut because it's just a presumed financial conflict of interest. And so you can rebut that and continue participate in the hearing, or you can recuse yourself. That is up to you. Best practice when you recuse yourself is to leave the room during the hearing unless you want to speak as an affected neighbor. You still have the right to do so. So we'll let Aaron and Chris address that issue.
So I'd like to rebut the presumed conflict of interest. If you take a 500, a foot arc around the property in Google Maps, I think it falls for me squarely in the public generally exception. And so I've just got something I'll read here. After careful consideration, I determined that any financial effect on my interest is indistinguishable from the effect on significant segment of the public as defined under the public generally exception. Specifically, this decision will impact at least 25% of the property owners and residents in town, and my interest is not uniquely affected beyond that of the broader community. Based on this analysis in compliance with FPPC regulations, I believe I'm legally and ethically permitted to participate in this decision-making process. If you'd like.
After careful consideration, I determined that any financial effect on my interest is indistinguishable from the effect on a significant segment of the public, as defined under the public generally exception. Specifically, this decision will impact at least 25% of local businesses and property owners and residents. My interest is not uniquely affected beyond that of the broader community. Based on this analysis, and in compliance with FPP's regulations, I believe I am legally and ethically permitted to participate in this decision-making process.
Any objections from other commissioners on that? Any concerns from the public? Please proceed, Trevor.
All right. So I did send out referrals for this project. Building official just noted that building permit was required, and he's the one who originally referred it to me, so they will have to get a building permit. No comments from city engineer, public works, or tribal entities. Environmental health commented that they don't have any additional requirements. They're the septic is to move through. So the project is in the planned development zone, allows a mix of uses. It's a larger parcel for this area of town, over 10,000 square feet. The property contains a single story residence, as well as another garage. Access to the garage is from the alley. There's also access to the carport from Trinity Street. And then the front door faces West Street, which is actually where the property frontage is, because that's the narrowest street frontage. The building meets the required setbacks for garages and accessory structures. Doesn't change the square footage. In a way, it sort of increases the footprint of the project, because right now it's sort of a dirt gravel floor and it's paved with concrete, but it's already covered with impervious surfaces. It's already a driveway that's compacted, so it's really not an area that would be appropriate to have a reserve area or something like that for the septic system. So we're not considering it to increase the footprint of the buildings. It complies with the height requirements, lot coverage, and sizes, parking. The project site is conforming as to parking. It's not expected that the project will affect views. It's not in an area of geologic hazards or instability. The septic system does consist of a pit, but it's functioning adequately. The tank is sized appropriately. There's plenty of room for reserve area in the southwest portion of the property. This isn't going to increase flows, and it's not the type of project that requires upgrades to the system. So, and as I mentioned, environmental health didn't have any issues with it. So I'm just going to note in our file that southwest part of the property needs to remain a area. Otherwise, if they have a valid operating permit and everything is functioning fine. The design review and view protection findings are written in a manner to allow approval, but as usual, if you disagree, or if the public raises information that conflicts with those should be reworded accordingly. Staff recommendation is for approval. There's a motion at the bottom of page 8 of the staff report for 20 of the packet. Can add conditions of approval if you feel that there are issues that aren't addressed, or request additional information, or deny the project if you feel that one or more of the findings can't be made. And the conditions of approval are pretty standard, nothing out of the ordinary. To answer.
Just note, the commissioners, if you're not aware, the applicant is in the room. Mary will take questions for Trevor, and then we'll give you a chance to say, just for process. So questions of the commissioner for Trevor?
A couple of really.
Yeah.
So it's my understanding that the garage was rebuilt a year ago, rebuilt a year ago. And is that project complete and signed off and everything is done? Okay. The next thing was, again, it's a nit, but the fact that the garage entrance, or the big door of the garage, was changed. It's still your opinion that that still remains the same, so it does not require a design review?
Oh, because a new door was added on the alley.
Yeah, and moved.
The building itself kept the exact same size and footprint.
I understand that, yeah.
But new doors and windows don't require design.
That's just what I wanted to clarify to make sure that that. And then, and I think I understand this one, but I just wanted to mention that in the pencil drawings, I'm sorry, in the letter from Mary, and I'm sure that this is not a big deal, but I just want to clarify it again. That in the letter from Mary, it says that a concrete perimeter will be put in to support the walls. And I believe now the design is pad.
The applicant can clarify that. I was thinking it was a pad, maybe. It is just a perimeter.
Was it? Mary?
We can, but if that's what you guys want, I'll put it, I would add what the computer is going to put a curve on the curve on where the wall would go, just to support the wall.
Yeah, I don't personally have any wishes one way or the other. It's just that it's a little confusing when you look at what you have described as what you intend to do versus in the engineering, architectural drawings. It includes information regarding a pad. So I just clarifying that.
And I'm sorry, that was my mistake. I was thinking it was on a pad. And then I will point out that this architectural drawing is from the garage rebuild. So when it talks about the pad, it's probably for the garage.
It was just a little confusing. I just wanted to clarify that. So right now it's going to be perimeter concrete walls to support the. Thank you.
Questions for Trevor?
I've got, I hope this is a quick question. I'll seek some clarification from the applicant in just a moment, but I'm looking at the south-facing wall and noting that there's these clear polycarbonate windows. And I'm wondering if at some point the applicant decides that, the sun coming in from the south will totally create that space. If referred to put windows in, is that still permitted without additional design review?
Yes, so new windows and doors do not require.
So it's the same question as Richard's, I suppose. Thanks.
I just have one comment, which is I agree with Trevor that this is something that could be permitted administratively. I do also really admire your garden. Definitely.
Mary, if you want to come up and say anything more about the project, you're welcome to. If not, any questions specifically for, any more questions for the applicant and the commissioners? I will then open it up to public comment. And with that, I'll note that I did receive a letter or an email that I forwarded to Gabe and Trevor. I'm not sure it made it in the record, but it's from Patty Fleshner. It says, "Dear Trevor and Planning Commissions, I support approval of the carport at 500 West Street before the Planning Commission on February 19th, 2025. Best regards, Patty Fleshner." And she called out that she is the owner of the property at 463 Trinity Street adjacent to Mary. So it's the city building there, the annex building, and then the 2 little units behind it. So if anybody would have any issues with the wall going up, that would be the property, and the property owner is coming in favor. So any other public comment? This project. That'll bring it back to the commissioners. Any further discussion or?
I have one suggestion, which is in no way supposed to resemble a demand, really, which is, regarding the bulk of the structure. I do think that the west facing exposure of this new proposed garage is, it's kind of in your face, so if there's a more aesthetically pleasing way to minimize bulk by choosing a more, I don't know, a less bulky in your face door, that might be nice. But again, just merely a suggestion and nothing that even vaguely resembles that demand. Yeah, so one of the findings in design review is just that there's an attempt to minimize bulk, right? And so this is the schematic to which I'm referring. It's just sort of a big old garage door, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that's, at least with the attempt to minimize bulk on the south facing exposure with windows. I think that, maybe choosing a garage door with windows might be preferable to choosing one with just.
Instead of solid. Okay.
That might be preferable, but again, this is not
Okay.
not a demand, just sort of my own
That's fine.
aesthetic suggestion.
It'll let more light in.
But I'm not trying to compel you to do that. I'm just
Okay.
making an observation.
And then just clarify one comment you made, Trevor. You mentioned that you would note in your files about the septic reserve in the packet. It says that it will be noted on the OWTS permit. Just want to clarify which, or is that the same thing said differently?
Yeah, same thing said there.
Okay.
It'll be both.
Application materials, information, and findings included in the staff report, and based on public testimony, I find the project to be consistent with Trinidad LCP and other applicable regulations, and I move to adopt the information and required design review and view protection findings in the staff report and approve the project as described in the staff report and condition herein.
First and second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Yes. Moving on then to, am I really going to say this out loud? Our last main agenda item, which appears like it should be a really easy one, just planning projects and priorities for a whole year. So, Trevor.
So this comes up occasionally, especially when it's really busy, kind of look at various projects. Because there's always things that come up during the year, and we want to make sure that we put those kind of things that come up into perspective of the bigger picture of what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to kind of provide, and so a lot of the things I'm working on right now aren't coming to you at this time either. So I wanted you to be aware of some of those things that staff's working on. And there has been talk about having a joint city council planning commission meeting. So you guys have been doing that annually for the past several years, but it was in association with the STR. But there might be interest in doing that. Anyway, I know the city council is definitely interested in the progress on the general plan update. So anyway, it's just a chance to provide you with information about what we're working on and to get some feedback from you in terms of what should be priorities or not be priorities, or if there's things that you want to add. Next we can get to them. Yeah, so I'll just do a quick summary of these things. So the ADU ordinance is definitely a staff priority. It's been working on for a while, and every year the law changes, and so it's it's just hard to keep up with that sort of thing. For example, now we need HCD approval too, Housing and Community Development. So you guys saw their comments. I provided those at, I guess, probably the January meeting. I have finished my responses to those, and I have sent them over to Coastal Commission staff to discuss with them, get some help with some questions. There are a few things that might need to come back to you as well. So, and there are some things that might have been left over from an old ordinance that don't comply with the state law, but don't need to be in there. One of the comments was regarding short-term rentals, so that's another, and you guys have talked about that a lot. So anyway, so we're working on that. And I don't know exactly how long the HCD and Coastal Commission staff review is going to be, but I'm going to keep trying to keep on and hope to get through it before the state law changes. Or from my rules. New application form. So this is another sort of unfinished grant project that we didn't quite get to we finished it, but we didn't implement it before the grant ran out. I did draft all new planning application forms, and I did include those for you here. Thought it might be good to get some feedback. I think, these aren't necessarily necessary to roll out now, but as we start to update the LCP, it's going to have more specific requirements for an application. And even if those requirements aren't in the ordinance, most of this stuff is important to have in an application. So, so I think it provides a clear directions and information for applicants. So, I think we might as well get these implemented sooner rather than later. Get them up on the website. We develop the FAQs on the website also as part of this process. So that seems like that should be pretty simple to implement that. And then the septic program that continues. We as you know, we finally have that implemented pretty much citywide. There's a few property owners that have been holdouts. So I will continue to work with city staff, I'm still the OWTS administrator, and to go through the permit renewals, as well as following up on some enforcement issues that have come up and try and get everybody into compliance. And then as noted at the January meeting, also some potential updates to the ordinance. So it's not a land use ordinance, although it was the Planning Commission that originally developed that ordinance. I don't think it requires your approval for that ordinance, but I think if I'm going to update it for ADUs, I might as well make a few updates based on our experiences in implementing the program. So that's another one, and then another big project for staff is the LCP update and working on the tasks under that grant. And so that essentially finishes, consists of finishing the general plan update. The noise element would be an exception because that's not generally a part of the LCP. But it does include the cultural resources element, which we still need to incorporate comments from the tribes. The safety element, which I'm seeing and I'm working on. I should have another draft for you in March. Background studies, that's another part of this. You haven't seen all of these, but the Coastal Commission asked for various kind of background information as part of the LCP update. So We've completed a visitor services facility study, basically overnight accommodations. The primary factor that's still outstanding is RVs and RV parks. And I'm trying to get a hold of the owners of the RV parks to kind of talk about what, you know, what they envision for the future, get a little bit more history about the park so that we can understand why they've converted to long-term tenancy. I'm also trying to get in touch with Department of Housing and Community Development that regulates RV parks and kind of get a little bit more information from them about, because RVs don't actually count as housing. But if they're not visitors, you know, it's kind of the city has to provide housing. We also have to provide visitor services. They're kind of in this limbo where they don't really provide anything that's technically real. But it does provide affordable housing. So anyway, so that's kind of the outstanding issue with that. I have also drafted a build out analysis. I do have to assess exactly all the changes in the land use, zoning and land use for various parcels that we've discussed. We've discussed a few. I've found a few more, and I want to go over those with Coastal Commission staff. Before that, we're updating the biological and soils report, and then I need to finalize the parking report. Then implementation plan. So this is the zoning ordinance primarily, but also subdivision grading ordinances. So I'm going to start bringing pieces of that to you, like chapter by chapter. There's going to be a lot of new components, some change components. So if you wanted to start familiarizing yourself with the zoning ordinance, I can get a homework. I did provide an update on some pending amendments that we have before the Coastal Commission. And then, let's see, other general plan updates. So noise element, we need to finish. That's not as much of a priority because it's not funded by this grant that runs out. And then at the end, we have to make sure everything's consistent. The trails will continue to be an issue in 2025. So I provided the updates on Axel Labor Memorial and Van Wyck Trail. But Lindo Trail may also come up as an issue. So that's another one that impacts tribal resources, cultural resources, and tribes have requested that be closed. We were working on a plan for that. It got stalled out when we worked on some of the other issues like Axel and Memorial Trail, but that might come up again in 2025. And also it needed, in order to close that trail, we needed to fix the boardwalk as well to provide alternative access. That should be happening, that's moving. Annexation and water service applications. So the city has, as you know, the city's received a couple of applications from Mill Creek Lane area. LAFCO has asked us to, either annex or show that it's infeasible to annex at this time. So we're going to be looking at that. I've asked GHD to assess, because there's some water pressure issues there. So we're looking at whether improvements to the water system would be needed, and then we're also reaching out to LAFCO to provide some education on annexation. So both the Planning Commission and the City Council asked for that. So it looks like they might make a presentation at the April Council meeting. So I'll keep you posted on that. Permit processing, obviously, we have to continue to do that as applications come in. I've got an addition on a West Haven Drive that will come to you in March. It's one that's been an addition's been approved there before, but it was never constructed. And then on the lot, the easternmost lot in Trinidad, which is across the creek from Hidden Creek RV Park. It's owned by the Yurok Housing Authority, and they're proposing five houses. So just reviewing CEQA initial study today. So that's a big project for Trinidad that's coming up. Enforcement issues often come up during the year, so I just mentioned that. And then I provided you the list with the future agenda items that have been on your agenda for a while that we haven't gotten to see if you want to include those in our priorities this year. Yes.
Can I ask you a quick question about your update? You're doing an update of soils resources? Like agricultural type soils?
It's so everything, so the NRCS came out with a new soil survey data. It was first available in 2010. So it's basically just kind of assessing that data and the agriculture, erosion potential. There's some septic stuff in there, so.
Yeah, I'm kind of familiar with their generic approach to.
It's generic.
Use their interpretation, so
Yeah.
that's not a problem.
Yeah, and so it kind of talks about the different soils and what their limitations are. But, you know, the main thing that comes out of it is saying that everything needs a site-specific study because you can't really rely on that broad scale data or site-specific analysis. That is funded by the LCP grant.
Solvents. So, I think I understand your process, your thought process to put together the priority list. But does that factor in and is that in alignment with your resources?
I will say that this list isn't necessarily in order of priority. I would say the two biggest priorities would be the ADU ordinance and the LCP update for staff. In terms of resources, I mean, I think, well, that, I mean, some of that is, I guess, do you mean money or time, staff time?
Well,
Or
money,
both.
time, and staff. In
Yeah.
terms of what staff you can put on each of these projects.
Absolutely. So again, one of the priorities would be using the grant funding while we have it. But in terms of other funding, that comes from the city budget and is partially up to the city council. There has not been a lot of oversight of the planning budget in recent years. So we've kind of picked our own priorities. So we'll see what the council does this year. And so that's why it might be good to provide some input. In terms of staff time, I cannot do all of this. I do have some help in my office. We've had some turnover and it's been hard to find planners, but I do have some help. Get a lot of it done.
So with that in mind, I guess the question, I go to the TS program, is it really at this point in the program the right use of your talents to be the administrator?
That is a good question. I would love to turn that over to someone else. I think it's unfortunate that the city lost Jennifer. She was doing a really good job with that. Maybe she could have taken it over. It's I really am just looking at the technical aspects though, and I don't know who else would have that technical background information. But at one point I did prepare sort of a sheet, an instruction sheet. So, but I think city staff has been short too. So I don't know if there's someone at the city who could take it over, but if there is, I would be happy to hand it off. I do have some kind of instructions set up that are, I think, ready to go, and then you'll find who you.
Yeah, I guess I would let the record show that I certainly would recommend that there be an effort to try to replace you as the administrator. I think it's at this, I think it is clearly, yes, there may be some technical issues, but you could consult. But as far as the day-to-day groundwork, it just doesn't seem like it's the appropriate thing for you to have to do. And with everything else that's on our plate, your plate, I would certainly want to see in the minutes that I recommend that the city try to come up with an ultimate administrator. This seems like a straightforward thing that I realize, again, personnel issues, but it just seems like it's the right thing to do. And I just had one other comment, and it has mostly to do with, I guess, my inability to figure it out. But at one time, there was a link on the website to the ordinances. I can't find it anywhere. Is it still there?
Yeah, I think it's just the municipal code link, and then it's the entire municipal code.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, I've got you'll all have to know a more long-winded way to basically make Richard's same point, which was just to ask, since I'm relatively new here, if you could share a little bit about how this sort of large bolus of grant money arrived sort of all at once and whether we might expect it to happen again. And I ask that in the context of, like, there are obviously, so many hours in a day that you can spend on all these various grant related tasks. I think it was this time last year where I mentioned, hey, there used to be an assistant city planner, right? And I'm just wondering, like, if there is sort of a mechanism for it, if again, there's one of these big windfalls of grant money that allows us to accomplish a bunch of stuff at once, whether there might be the potential for getting an assistant.
That would be an employee of the city or you, I mean, yeah. I think, if the city wanted to consider that, that would be fine. The problem, grant funding comes and goes. That's one of the tough things. Once we get through the LCP update, hopefully the workload will drop off a lot. But as I mentioned before, I think the state law is just becoming more and more onerous. And so there's more and more for city staff to do, not just the planner, but other staff. And so, the city has had to just increase the number of staff. And yes, at SHN, we've attempted to sort of have someone who could take over for me. And we've just had turnover and that hasn't worked out. I have people who can help, but not necessarily dedicate all their time. This is just the reason we have all this work to do in that particular grant for the year is because, last year and the year before we had the housing grants. And so we had to sort of put off the LCP update while we worked on those grants. So grants are really great things. We try and take advantage of them. The city's really good at getting funding, but sometimes we've been very busy with the grants for sure. That doesn't really answer your question.
Well, I guess I don't really know what the question was, except, what else can we do to better ensure that when there is grant money available, that all of the grant tasks get done and implemented, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like we're kind of always, and it's not just the planning grants, it's other grants, we're always kind of struggling at the end to finish everything out. And I think a lot of it in Trinidad is because, just like with the general plan overall, we're chugging along on something and then, oh my gosh, trails or STRs or signs, and we get derailed by something like that. And so that's part of why, we end up in that situation and reason I hope to kind of look at this in a larger perspective and keep our priorities in mind.
Yeah, I want to be very careful the way that I say this. But it was clear, Trevor, from our very first interaction, you've just got incredible expertise, but that you also have a lot of sort of monotonous, tedious tasks that you always find yourself performing. Certainly it would be nice to find qualified staff who could do some of that more tedious stuff. But I also just want to say this, that like we're in the AI era now. I was wondering if there's been any contemplation of how we might let our robot overlords pick up some of that slack as far as some of that tedious stuff. We all had a laugh at the HCG comments in our last meeting that may or may not have been produced by AI. But if indeed it was, there's precedent for planning and that sort of matter to be at least contributed to by AI engines or whatever.
There definitely is. I've played around with it a little bit. It might take someone younger to get more into it. It absolutely requires a lot of human checking, though. So, how much of a time saver it is? I think it's in those early stages where it's a little bit of a toss up, but it'll get better.
Yeah, I guess I was just sort of wondering, like, if in your professional network, there's discussions of ways to more effectively integrate it into more planning-oriented tasks.
Yeah, there are. I think, things like coming up with flyers about, public, information dissemination, flyers. I think that's it probably has a lot of usefulness at this time for those sorts of things. It can even write parts of staff reports and it can write parts of environmental documents. It can certainly do that. I haven't played around with it enough to know how much time it saves versus not, but it definitely, people are using it for those things.
I'd like to just throw something out there. You mentioned that, grants come and go. Your work efforts come and go. And this is one of the reasons why the consultants are out there, because they work on a project basis. You can let them go, you can pull them in. And there are a lot of consulting outfits that have people who can handle mundane tasks. And they might have enough staff that different expertise need be counted on. If not from one consultant to a group of consultants. I know, trying to staff somebody that handles many different things without superior expertise, especially for a small city, it's pretty tough to do. Until AI comes along and saves us all, it's just something to think about. No reason you can't pressure a consultant to say, hey, would you find people who will help you do these more mundane things, and so you can focus your expertise on what you need. That's the back and forth. So don't just accept what they give you, just demand what you want. See what happens.
And I think there is some more opportunity for that. Anton has been helping me more with noticing than what we previously did. The packets, I was just talking about Gabe, whether the city's going to get a color copier, see if I could get Anton to make packets for me, but I don't think that's on the horizon. But that could be sourced out. At SHN, we have admin people that could do the packet for me. I just have to, or Anton could probably put the PDF together. That is really time consuming just to do that tedious mundane stuff. And it takes time to teach someone to do that. And that's always a little bit of a hurdle, but it would be nice. It would be nice to increase some efficiencies like that. Yeah. And that's a good idea.
I just have some comments. I guess first, thank you, Trevor, for all your time, just in general, and then attention to detail, but also thank you for putting together this nice summary that's sort of everything on the shelf here for us to look at. And I feel like will serve me as a good reference, at least for the rest of the year. What's going on here? And I guess I did particularly appreciate the application form that you attached that I hadn't seen before, or maybe none of us have seen before. Having gone through that process a couple times recently, helpful to know what the heck to expect. Going through that process. That was exciting. I have other comments, but they're a little more specific to specific projects. Oh, I guess the other thing is that I do hope we have a joint city council.
You what?
I do hope that.
Oh, you support that?
I support that.
Just a few things that came across me also support that, and perhaps a good opportunity when LAFCO is presented to the council would be a great time. That way everybody hears the information together from the same source. When LAFCO presents one time, you'll have kind of the same working foundation. An idea there. A lot of the overall comments that I had here have been discussed already. The concept of, consultants or somebody that you can outsource some of this stuff to, speaks to surge capacity. What is your surge capacity? And I guess specifically, is there something you need from the city? Is it money? Is it direction? Is it what to be able to? And I understand the trouble with hiring people, but, and we can say do this, but if you don't have the body to do it, obviously. Is there something we as the planning commission can do to drive that message home? Because, the 1.5 or 2.5 cycles I've been on the planning commission, the fact that you're making packets is, in my opinion, not what I think your talent. They're very nice packets. You do a phenomenal job, but I think your expertise, I'd rather see it invested elsewhere. But I guess I feel like our agenda is run in large part by our grant cycle. And we are so beholden to this money and using it up that we are prioritizing that as a planning commission and as a city, I guess, at the expense of getting other things done. And maybe we need to evaluate, maybe it's okay to leave some money on the table at the end of the grant cycle because it was more important for us to accomplish these other things. I feel like we're kind of chasing our tail on that. That's kind of really all I have to say on those things. The next question or comment is, enforcement and compliance comes up in a lot of what we touch here at the Planning Commission, OWTS and building and vegetation and all those things. And my impression is that we have very weak mechanisms to do anything with that in the city. And so is there something different that you would like us to develop that, and you don't have to answer tonight, but I'd be interested in hearing ideas if there's something we can do that is a better tool for folks that have had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 notices on septic and are still not complying. And there's not a valid reason why they're not complying other than perhaps just obstinance or indifference versus having a legitimate issue. I'd love to hear, ideas on that. As far as the OWTS not really being a planning piece, I feel like it touches a lot of what we do planning. So personally, I would like to at least be kept aware of that. We're writing new stuff related to that, and it's OWTS is kind of a planning tool in our town, like it or not, right? It's the biggest growth and development limiter that we have is that we are 100% septic, right? And that's a very wonderful thing, in my opinion, because it really controls growth for us. And then the last thing, I just had a comment as you're doing the forms, they look great. And I know there's a little bit of FAQ on there, and I will send you a link and maybe you can share it with the other commissioners so we don't get any Brown Act stuff. But City of Fairfield, where I used to live, has a really nice kind of, I want to put in, it's a simple table. And I want to put in a garbage disposal. Is it new? Permit. Is it replacement? No permit. I want to add an outlet. Is it new? It just really kind of helps people understand and will, I think, potentially limit a lot of phone calls, a lot of staff time, fielding that kind of Because there are some things that are very straightforward. I know there's a lot that's gray depending upon where you are, you know, which map you're going in the yellow shaded zone, or you here, there, that's kind of all I have on that. If there's nothing else from commissioners, we'll open up the public comment on this item. I bring it back to us. Other comments for Trevor? Are you getting what you need from us, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would like to understand what your primary priorities are. I think that, a lot of these comments are important for the city council to hear. And so, I think the mayor is in support of having a joint meeting, so I think that will happen, so we can discuss these again, but I guess, I can answer some questions. We are trying to hire a couple more planners, so hopefully that will, and they'll be more entry level, so the Monday tasks. And enforcement, that's such a tough one. I think we have pretty good tools. It might be worth, having the city's attorney's office review the nuisance abatement ordinance, but it's time consuming and it can be very expensive if you write a couple of letters and you hope you get compliance, but after that, it gets really tough. And especially when, because then you have to start getting attorneys and courts involved. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know of any city who's super successful and good at that. I think public education outreach is a big part. We've talked about, maybe sending out information to the public to remind them, hey, you need a permit to cut a tree, or, whatever it is. The city was doing a newsletter for a little while. City does the email newsletters. Maybe we can include a little blurb. So maybe a little bit more public outreach might be helpful on that. And but it's a tough one.
To your question, as far as priorities, speaking for myself only, of the items you've given here, for me, the number one would be, I guess, ADU, because the calculus has already changed on that since we saw it first and is going to continue to change. And so if we want to finish it, we need to finish it. Otherwise, we're going to piecemeal it and it's going to continue. The land is going to continue to move underneath us. So I guess that would be personally my number one priority, and then everything else after that, in whatever order.
Yeah, I would second that, certainly. Yeah, I think there's a lot of these things that are more exciting or more interesting, especially compared to like the general plan, but that and the general plan, which I think you noted in here at the top.
I reached back into the recesses of my mind and remember whether there was any planning related stuff on that community-wide survey that was issued last summer and results were disseminated at a council meeting. Might be good to thumb back through those and see if there's anything directly relevant to our work. Safety, like pedestrian safety and public safety, I feel like was a big item, but pretty contentious.
I want to mention something. Spent a good bit of time going through our safety element, mostly in terms of hazards. And I don't know how the city is run in the past, especially through the planning commission, but a lot of the demands there are on people doing things or people being notified about hazards. If you really implement everything that's on those items that people are required to do, it's going to make a huge amount of work. City staff, I can see where if you're implementing things like having people do assessments of their own private property, about bluff and tree risks and things, it's like, I don't know how you make people do something like that, if you pay for it. But a lot of that is pretty onerous. I don't know if that's state law that's running that or seismic or safety element general practices. If you're trying to look ahead, and then any kind of development going on, people even doing things to upgrade their property, seem like you're going to bring an awful lot of effort to city staff, to your volunteers like this outfit. I mean, I've watched this lady go through this process to enclose her carport. It's like, are you kidding me? I mean, really? All that effort? Just something similar to that. It's like, couldn't that just be like a rubber stamp? It's like, this is no big deal.
We are working on that. I think we're close to that. Yeah.
We're setting up for stuff that's way more onerous than that. More information comes in about these bluff issues, and is that bluff edge, not just physically moving land, but just in terms of studies. You take people looking at the geomorphology out there, where most of us think the bluff edge is. If they do an evaluation and they move that bluff edge, that assessment moves it back 20 feet, just on paper, turns back feet.
Yeah, no, and I think, yes.
In the future, there's talking about effort and resources.
Yeah, and Richard, you've made that point quite a few times, and others, with the number of programs and policies, and I think that, we've been looking at things element by element and section by section, but I think it would also be good to take a little bit more holistic view of it. I would say the Coastal Commission is driving the vast majority of it, and I don't know if we can. The little Trinidad can. We'd have to push back and show why we don't need that stuff, so it would be harder, more work up front. Maybe we could do some of that. We could certainly try. But that's what's driving a lot of the requirements.
Have there ever been coalitions of cities that have pushed back against things from the Coastal Commission? I'm just thinking.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cities have pushed back. They're pushing back in particular on the issue of and sea level rise and that sort of thing. I might have mentioned at the last meeting, the Coastal Commission does have a coastal cities sort of subcommittee, and they have and they meet periodically with coastal cities, and they have their staff work with staff from these coastal city representatives to work on some of these issues. And the last time they met, staff thought they had this great compromise and presented it, and the commission itself was like, no, it's not. So, and I think, and there are places like, Pacifica is really pushing back on the armoring. So there are communities that are pushing back. The real problem I see is Trinidad's ordinances and general plan are so old, and they're so inadequate, and they're so difficult to use that if we can't get something through, then we're stuck with this old stuff that we have. So, I could certainly strategize with our local Coastal Commission staff about, because one of the issues has always been they don't want this piecemeal. We can do small ordinance amendments, but like the general plan, we can't give them the general plan element by element, and we can't even give them the entire general plan because it has to, or we have to show our ordinances are consistent with the general plan. So we have to update so we have to give them this huge package all at once. And it just seems so overwhelming. And once we have that, then we can do smaller incremental amendments. So I think it would be good to strategize with staff. I do meet with them monthly. We've had to cancel our last few meetings to strategize whether there's a way we can break off smaller pieces to do this because it is, it's gonna be difficult. But we have to get it done.
I think that's a very important comment to make. We have our combined meeting so that the city council recognizes the complexity of this whole thing, because I know that all of this, I get questions all the time. Let's take it so long on the general plan. You know, it's like two things in the city that people ask about: dog ordinances and general plan. And everybody goes. I think that's a real important thing to get across to the city council, because they have to really be aligned with us in terms of the priority to try to get that moving just as much as we can.
And the complexity of the ask from the coastal.
Yeah,
commission,
yeah.
before we give it to them, I think that's I
Yeah.
think it'll be educational for a moment here. We have a number of council members now that have never served on the planning commission, so might have the background like in the past. It's kind of a, so it's been on the agenda for a long time.
Right.
Might have been done. Well, yeah, I think that's a great point.
It'd be a wonderful task if you ever did get someone that could help you is search for all programs in general. I guarantee it'll be overwhelming.
I thought that, but I didn't want to say it because then that's one more thing.
No, I'm saying if there was ever a person.
Right. Maybe a chat GPT or AI, right? Find all the programs out
Yeah.
and they're trying to, actually, I think you can do that. Like handling.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on the priority discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to mention some of these upcoming agenda items since Trevor made a point of asking about them. Chris and I both mentioned that the design review guidelines we sort of sat down and drafted together. It predated a lot of our experience with design review process, and much more wanted to revisit that, which is one part of the equation here. But the other thing is that 50% of our meetings actually involve design review. Maybe that's an overestimation, but I think the sooner we can get that actually implemented, it gives us something more concrete to work with in those discussions, which is not to say that it needs to be prioritized, but if it's nearly usable, let's make it fully usable.
Yeah, I think, and I should probably run it by somebody too, to just make sure we're not going into some legal issues. But I mean, I think as long as the design guidelines are consistent with what's been adopted, I think you can sort of use those as additional guidance. It's not the official findings that you make, but you could look at those to help you make the findings. So I think we talked about kind of identifying which of the new guidelines sort of track to the old guidelines, and that might be one way. And I think that would be fairly simple to do.
Because we can't use the new guidelines till the new general plan is adopted.
I mean, they're not the official guidelines. They're not your official, but I think to the extent that they help you refine what the findings actually are, you could use them as part of in your decision making. And for the most part, they track pretty well with, the current design review findings are very broad. And so, I think, just like we've used some planning commission policies, you could maybe set that as policy to help you review that.
Your policy to use these interim.
Until it's challenged.
Well,
Use it until it's challenged.
but again, your findings aren't going to be those. They're just going to be used to help you make an discussion.
but what would be my final comment hopefully is that I was the one who requested dealing with cultural resources and project reviews, just because I felt like we're oftentimes sort of in the dark about the nature of the cultural resources that we are oftentimes, tasked with considering. And I don't know if that needs to be an agenda item. I think that, last time we talked about it, someone just, hey, go to the museum and talk to them or something like that. So I don't know that we need like a workshop on like dealing with cultural resources and project reviews. It'd be nice, but I don't know if it needs to be your agenda item. Sometimes we do individually speak out or something.
I think it's a very good topic. It can be a difficult topic because I think there's a lot of stuff that is, it's because of the sensitivity of cultural resources, the confidentiality of it's difficult. It's a difficult topic to discuss. So I think it is a good topic. I don't know that maybe we could work on some guidelines in the background. I was hoping when the city developed its tribal consultation policies that it might get into a little bit more specifics, but because there's so much disagreement even just between the tribes that they couldn't really get more specific than just what the state law requires.
Maybe I might suggest revising it to like exploring mechanisms for dealing with cultural resources, just so we know what our possible, venues for those types of discussions might be. It's a big item that would be figuring out how to deal with it would be a good first step.
Yeah, or are we gonna? And it is an LCP update issue too. One of the things that came up in the HCD comments, Coastal Commission asked us to add, in terms of the coastal resource protections, is you can't build a new ADU with a ministerial administrative permit on lands that are culturally sensitive. Well, we don't have a map. What does that mean? And that was one of HCD's questions. So, it's not a simple issue, but it is something that we'll address more in the update, hopefully, but I have to keep it a little bit general since not everyone can agree.
Right now, it's the city limits.
It almost is, yeah. And for city projects, I think that's basically the city's policy is every project requires a cultural monitor.
Anything else on that topic, or move on to commissioner reports? The commissioners have anything to report on?
I got. I still don't know if it's spam or not. Maybe this isn't the right place, but maybe we all got the email. We're asked to do some sort of training. Maybe we all got it. Maybe we didn't.
Did this come to your Trinidad?
Oh,
Yes,
was it?
my commissioner.
Was it the 80-1-2-3-4 training, the ethics?
Maybe it's that.
Yeah, it was a reminder probably that it's coming due. I should have sent that out to you guys. I got it as well. I'm wondering if that's what
It comes from Platform at Target.
Yeah, so that is not spam. That is the city's mechanism to deliver the 80-1-2-3-4, which is our ethics. And then the other one is the harassment training. That program was run by Jennifer, who's been with the city, and I pinged the city manager and Gabe on that, and they're transitioning that responsibility to somebody else. It's a pretty straightforward program. They just need to.
We just have to do that every year.
Yeah, I think the 81-2-4 is every 2, and the harassment discrimination, I believe, should be annually, like most business places have it.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
But they are automatically sent out, and it came out.
Well,
Anyway,
just if you're going to resend it, I don't think.
it was what it was. It's a reminder that it's coming due.
So,
It's in a separate section of the email, like a email from humans. inbox and like other entities.
Well, could you resend it? I just got my.
Well, you probably haven't even been signed up for this company yet. It's a third-party vendor the city uses to help deliver mandatory trainings. We use it where I work too.
Yeah,
So I was really excited to have to do the training both at one job and then the other. So fun fact, if you have a company that uses, they're now called Vector Solutions, and you do the training at one place, it does not carry over to the other. You have to do it in both places.
Through the same company.
Through the same company, yeah. You have to sit through the program twice, the exact same program. Yeah, so.
If you trouble, get rid of it.
Government officials.
You have to do it.
Any other commissioner reports? Staff report, Trevor, anything else for us?
No, I think that planning projects pretty much covers my stuff for it.
All right, we kind of already talked about future agenda items. And there's nobody left in the room other than Joe, not nobody, but no members of the public. Sorry, phrase that differently. And that we are adjourned. I don't think it's a record, but stop. Yeah.